Deadwood is an essential component of bonsai aesthetics and creating the illusion of deadwood or at least dead. Branches is one of the first things people learn when they get started with bonsai. You'll often hear people talk about jin and shari, which are two Japanese terms that mean techniques to expose the dead areas of a tree, both of which create the illusion of dead branches. But there's another term that's rarely talked about called yogodo, which is the art of leaving deadwood alone and letting nature do its work. In this video, I'll be talking about all three techniques, but my focus will be on deadwood left alone by Mother Nature and how you can use it in your own bonsai. So let's get started. Deadwood can refer to several things when we're talking about bonsai. It could be a branch that has died due to disease or pest infestation, but more often than not, deadwood refers to pieces of bark that have fallen off the tree, exposing the brown inner wood underneath. This creates an aged, weathered look that adds tons of character to a bonsai. And while you can mimic this look with the jin and shari techniques, there's just something different about naturally occurring deadwood. Now I want to make something very clear here. If you see deadwood on your bonsai, especially if it's a lot of black dead branches, it's most likely that the tree is dead. However, if you see a single branch or a few branches with exposed inner wood, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. A lot of trees, even healthy ones, have dead branches. The reason being is that photosynthesis only takes place in green leaves. Without leaves, a branch doesn't have the energy to produce food, causing it to die. These branches are referred to as naked branches, and they actually completely normal and expected on most trees. Even coniferous trees like pines naturally lose needles and shed old branches every year, which exposes the inner wood and creates deadwood. The key thing to remember with all these dead branches is that they should be left alone unless they pose a safety risk. Allowing the branches to remain on the tree and slowly decompose over time is what is going to add age and character to your bonsai. The whole idea behind bonsai is to mimic the appearance of a tree that has grown wild in nature, and that includes dead branches. In fact, if you think about it, some of the most beautiful bonsai trees are those with lots of deadwood. And that's because they resemble an ancient tree that stood the test of time. So now that we've established how natural and common dead branches are on bonsai, I want to talk about why you shouldn't remove them. First of all, removing dead branches on a regular basis can lead to excessive pruning, which stresses out the tree. Now, this isn't so much a concern if you're working with a large, mature tree. But if you're growing a young tree, too much pruning at a young age can negatively impact its development. Think of it this way. If you were born and someone came up to you and cut off one of your arms, and then waited a year and cut off another arm, you would probably grow up stunted and unhealthy. That's how bonsai trees are when they're excessively pruned. They need to keep their limbs to grow. Another reason why you shouldn't remove dead branches is because they rehome to beneficial microbes and fungi that help break down organic matter and return nutrients to the soil. When you remove dead branches, you're also removing these beneficial microbes and replacing them with nothing. Sure, you can reintroduce them later, but it's much easier and more effective to just leave them alone in the first place. Removing dead branches also makes the tree more susceptible to pests and diseases because those microbes that normally protect the tree from harmful insects and pathogens are gone. Finally, removing dead branches disrupts the natural aesthetic of the tree. Dead branches create an aged, weathered look that many people love about bonsai, and removing them makes the tree look less attractive. Now, I've been preaching to leave deadwood alone, but there are times where you do need to prune it away. If the branch has turned black and is soft to the touch, it's most likely rotten and needs to be removed. Another time you might need to prune deadwood away is if it's growing into a living branch. As the dead branch grows, it will eventually strangle the living branch and kill it. So you'll need to prune it away as soon as possible. Also, any dead branches that are hanging low and touching the ground need to be removed immediately. The soil where the branch touches the ground is usually rich in organic matter, so it becomes a nice place for pests and diseases to grow. And if the branch is dead, it won't be able to fight them off. So you'll need to remove the dead branch as soon as possible. If you see any pests or diseases coming out of the dead branch, you'll need to remove it as well. Otherwise, the pests or diseases will spread throughout the tree and kill it. Finally, any dead branches that are too large or too close to the trunk need to be removed. Large dead branches can break off and cause serious damage, and branches that are too close to the trunk can rub against each other and cause abrasions. Now, when you do find yourself needing to remove dead wood, it's important to do it correctly. This helps the wound heal faster and reduces the chances of pests and diseases getting in. To reduce the size of the wound, make sure you cut above the branch collar, which is the swollen area at the base of the branch. This will allow the branch to callus over faster and prevent pests and diseases from entering the tree. If you don't cut above the branch collar, you'll end up with a large, unsightly scar on your bonsai. Now, I mentioned earlier that bonsai artists can mimic the look of deadwood using techniques like jin and shari, but what about yogoto? Well, yogoto is kind of like the combination of jin and shari, except instead of carving it yourself, you let nature take its course. You can create the illusion of dead branches by leaving leaf litter and twigs on the branches. Over time, the twigs will eventually decompose and fall off, leaving behind an aged, weathered look. You can also use this technique with deciduous trees by leaving some of the dead leaves on the branches during the winter. This will create the illusion of dead branches and also provide some much-needed protection from the cold. Just make sure you remove the leaves before spring so they don't interfere with new growth. If you want to speed up the process of creating deadwood, you can always just leave a branch alone after you prune it. By leaving the stem alone, you allow the outer bark to eventually peel away, exposing the inner wood. You can also create the illusion of dead branches by pruning off the leaves on one side of the branch. This will create the illusion of a branch that's dead on one side, which is a pretty common occurrence in nature. Keep in mind, though, that this technique works best on young, flexible branches. If you try this technique on a large, rigid branch, it'll just look silly. Now I know that a lot of people want to remove deadwood from their bonsai because they think it makes the tree look old and unattractive, but I'm here to tell you that it's quite the opposite. Deadwood is an essential component of bonsai aesthetics, and it should never be removed unless absolutely necessary. Not only does it add tons of character to a bonsai, but it's also completely natural and expected on most trees. By allowing deadwood to remain on your bonsai, you're giving it a more natural and aged appearance. And if you really want to take it a step further, you can always use techniques like jin and shari to create the illusion of dead branches. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, happy bonsaiing.